so many of us that she cut ties with the royal family, yet she keeps using this royal title as she sells jams.
This morning, Harry and Meghan stepping out together in London for the first time since announcing their very public split from the royal family.
Harry and Meghan, they're at it again. Another faux royal tour. Really?
The date is the 19th of January, 2026. And the morning headlines in London show Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepping out together, smiling for the cameras, projecting an image of unity and resilience. But behind the polished veneer and the carefully coordinated outfits, a very different, far more chaotic scene is unfolding across the Atlantic. While the public sees a couple possibly teasing a return to royal life, the private reality is one of absolute cold panic. The word being whispered in their inner circle right now isn't reconciliation, and it isn't rebranding. It is two words that signify the end of the American dream: clean up. The directive is to wipe the records, erase the trails, and hope nobody finds what they are looking for. Because the news breaking out of Washington is the kind that ends careers and destroys reputations. Harry and Meghan's assets have reportedly been frozen in the United States.
Once Meghan treated as an HRH, that's the most realistic on the list where you can go, I can see these two have.
This is not a tabloid rumor about a failed Netflix deal or a Spotify cancellation. This is a federal issue. When the money stops moving, when accounts disappear from access overnight, and when the liquidity that fuels a celebrity lifestyle vanishes, you don't stick around to explain yourself. You panic and then you run. Today, we are breaking down exactly why they suddenly want out of America, why the narrative of security threats is being weaponized once again, and why this sudden desire to flee has nothing to do with cameras or paparazzi. This is about the IRS. This is about missing tax filings. And this is about millions of dollars that may have finally hit a brick wall. What you are about to hear isn't gossip. It is a story about paperwork, and in the world of high-stakes finance, paperwork is always where the empire unravels.
They're not promoting that charity. They're typically complaining about what's going on in their lives or what happened 4 years ago.
To understand the gravity of this situation, one must first understand the absolute power of the Internal Revenue Service. Americans understand instinctively that you do not play games with the IRS. They do not operate on celebrity time. They do not care about royal titles, and they are entirely unmoved by trauma narratives or carefully crafted public images. When the numbers don't add up, the machine starts turning, and it crushes everything in its path. According to sources close to the situation, the IRS began looking into Archewell, the Sussexes Foundation, following mounting public pressure, and too many unanswered questions that kept piling up over the last 2 years. People had been asking for months where the money was going, what the administrative expenses were, and why the filings weren't public. When enough noise is made, eventually someone official has to take a look.
Women on the ground together, but at the same time to feel the palpable longing for family and friends while deployed.
When the IRS looks into a charitable organization, this isn't just a surface-level audit where they glance at a few spreadsheets and call it a day. The process is forensic and invasive. They track exactly who is benefiting from the funds. They examine every expense that looks even remotely personal. They follow payments that might be circling back to the people running the foundation. They scrutinize operational costs that could conveniently be funding someone's lifestyle instead of the charitable mission. We are talking about staff salaries, private travel expenses, security costs, consulting fees, and event budgets. All of it gets examined under a microscope. If anything looks like it is benefiting the founders personally rather than the cause, that is when the red flags start popping up everywhere.
For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK.
The claim currently circulating is that money classified as charitable expenses might have been flowing right back to support Harry and Meghan's private ecosystem. This is known in legal terms as private inurement, and it is the death knell for a charity. We are not talking about a small accounting error or a miscategorized receipt for a business lunch. We are talking about substantial amounts potentially being reclassified as charitable spending when they were actually personal benefits. The implications of such a finding are huge. You cannot spin that away with good PR. You cannot fix that with a carefully worded statement or a sympathetic interview with a friendly journalist. This is a serious legal problem, the type that doesn't just go away. It follows you across borders.
As far as risk was concerned, and then overnight I was reduced to the lowest without actually going through the risk management board.
A problem of this magnitude is exactly why the next step happens. Once the IRS starts digging and they find discrepancies they don't like, they have devastating tools at their disposal. They can lock everything down, they can freeze every account, every asset, and every dollar that flows through that foundation while they dig deeper. This is exactly what we are told has happened. The shutdown came down hard. It wasn't a delay or a hold for review. It was a complete freeze. No transfers, no withdrawals, no access. When that happens, when the money stops moving and you can't touch anything, suddenly your entire operation grinds to a halt.
2027, but this story relates to Meghan Markle arriving on our shores this year. Talk about unwanted illegal immigration.
When your foundation is frozen and you can't access the funds that run your whole world, America starts looking a lot different. The country that once seemed full of opportunity and freedom suddenly doesn't feel very welcoming anymore. It feels like a trap. To understand why this freeze is catastrophic, you have to understand that everything financial about Harry and Meghan runs through their charity foundation, Archewell. This isn't an exaggeration. The staff, the lifestyle, the image, the expenses, and the survival of their brand all flow through this entity. This foundation isn't just a feel-good charity where they show up for photo ops and sign some checks. It is the financial spine of the entire Sussex operation.
Basically, it's kind of like a big umbrella that oversees lots of smaller charities.
Most celebrities have multiple revenue streams that operate independently. They have endorsement deals, production companies, investments, and personal projects. But for Harry and Meghan, Archewell is the hub. It is where the money flows through, where salaries get paid, and where operational costs get covered. If the foundation handles staff paychecks and the foundation is frozen, the staff doesn't get paid. If the foundation covers lifestyle expenses categorized as operations, those expenses are no longer covered. If image management and PR retainers are paid through the foundation, the spin doctors stop working. Even security arrangements are often tied to these funds. This organization isn't just part of their brand, it is the infrastructure that keeps everything running. And that is exactly where the problems start.
The problem with these two is they don't listen to the people around them. And if they don't agree with the people around them.
As a public charity, Archewell is legally required to provide its tax returns to anyone who formally requests them. That is the law. It is part of the transparency requirements that come with being a tax-exempt charitable organization. You get certain benefits, but in exchange, you have to show the public where the money is going. Multiple people formally requested these documents. They followed the proper channels, submitted the right forms, and asked to see the tax records for 2023 and 2024. But those documents never showed up. When people requested them, nothing came back. Even more telling is that the IRS itself has not published these returns on its public database. This absence happens for one reason only. The paperwork was not approved. When the IRS reviews a charity's tax documents, they are looking for consistency, transparency, and accuracy. They want to see that the numbers line up and that the money is going where it is supposed to go. When something doesn't get cleared, it means questions were not answered properly. It means the expenses didn't match up with what was reported. It means someone looked at those records and found something they didn't like. When a charity can't get its paperwork cleared, when the documents don't pass the most basic level of scrutiny, that is not a minor administrative hiccup. That is a massive warning sign. At that point, the conversation stops being about public relations and starts becoming something much more serious. The scrutiny intensifies, the questions get harder, and the pressure builds. If that organization can't get its basic tax returns accepted, if the IRS won't publish those documents because they don't meet the standard, then everything connected to it becomes questionable. Every expense, every transaction, every payment is now under a microscope. When you have built your entire financial structure around one entity and that entity is paralyzed, it is a structural crisis. Without cleared returns, without transparent records, and without the IRS giving that stamp of approval, the whole operation starts to look shaky. Donors start asking questions, partners start backing away, and the people who write the checks that keep everything running start wondering where their money actually went. But the pressure isn't just coming from the United States. Across the ocean, another financial scandal is brewing that connects directly to this crisis. We need to talk about the Invictus Games Foundation. Huge sums were raised, massive amounts moved around, and now it is all being questioned. The Invictus Games is supposed to be about supporting wounded veterans, giving them a platform, and helping them heal through sport. It is a noble cause that people want to support. Because of that, the donations rolled in from corporations, governments, and individual donors. But things start getting uncomfortable when you look at the recent allocation for the Birmingham Games. Birmingham received £26 million for hosting the games. That is an enormous sum. While hosting a major international sporting event costs a fortune for venues, logistics, and security, the context makes this number suspicious. Birmingham got that massive sum while the city itself was financially collapsing. The city was struggling, cutting services to its own citizens, and dealing with a budget crisis. Yet somehow, this huge allocation flowed in for the event. People started wondering why such a massive amount was given when the city was already in trouble. Where exactly did it all go? What were the actual costs versus what was allocated? And more importantly, why aren't veterans themselves seeing more of this support? The uncomfortable reality is that veterans are still underfunded. The very people the Invictus Games is supposed to benefit are still struggling to get adequate resources and care. Meanwhile, massive sums move through connected organizations and networks. That doesn't add up. When the numbers don't make sense, people start digging. They start asking harder questions and following the trail to see where the money actually went versus where it was supposed to go. The timing is impossible to ignore. Invictus is suddenly under the microscope at the exact same time Archewell is facing an IRS freeze. These aren't separate issues happening coincidentally. These are connected organizations, connected people, and connected financial flows. When one foundation starts raising red flags, people naturally look at the other entities in the same orbit. They wonder if the same problems exist elsewhere. They start asking if this is an isolated issue or a pattern. Once donors, governments, and the public all start demanding to know where the money went, the whole dynamic changes. It is no longer just about Harry and Meghan. It is about everyone connected to these financial pipelines, everyone who signed off on these transactions, and everyone who benefited from these arrangements. The scrutiny expands outward, touching everyone in the network. Institutions stop protecting individuals and start protecting themselves. Organizations that were once supportive suddenly distance themselves. Partners who were once cooperative start covering their own exposure because nobody wants to be caught holding the bag when the trail is being followed. This is the moment everything changes because it is no longer about managing PR or controlling a narrative. It is about budgetary accountability and financial transparency. It is about following where the cash went. When you are dealing with that kind of scrutiny, silence becomes dangerous. This is the moment everything shifts because the assets were completely frozen. Not delayed, not under review, but frozen. When a charity's assets get shut down like this, it means no transfers, no withdrawals, and no quiet reshuffling of funds behind the scenes. Everything stops. Every account gets blocked. Every dollar becomes inaccessible. For Harry and Meghan, that is catastrophic because their entire operation allegedly depends on reaching those charitable funds. Staff salaries are locked, so they can't pay their team. Security arrangements are inaccessible, so they can't maintain the protection they claim they desperately need. PR retainers are blocked, so they can't keep their image team working to control the narrative. Legal consultations are shut down, so they can't keep their lawyers on speed dial. Lifestyle overhead is gone. All those expenses that were flowing through the foundation, all those costs that were being covered, just stop. Overnight. Now we are seeing why there is so much panic. The urgency makes sense. They aren't defending themselves with facts, documents, or detailed filings that would clear it all up because they can't. When you have the receipts, when the paperwork is clean, and when the numbers add up, you show that. You present it. You say, look at this. We have nothing to hide. You don't run. You don't create distractions. You don't suddenly pivot to talking about security threats and needing to leave the country. But when the cash stops moving, when you can't reach the accounts anymore, and when the resources that keep your entire world running suddenly become untouchable, you can't fight back with documentation. Maybe the documentation is exactly what you don't want people seeing. When you are exposed financially, when the infrastructure that supports your whole operation gets shut down, you don't stay and try to fix it through the system. You don't sit down with accountants and lawyers to work through it line by line. You look for a way out. You look for an exit. You look for somewhere else to go where the same scrutiny might not follow you. Because once the funding dries up and you can't touch it anymore, maintaining the image becomes impossible. You can't keep up appearances when you can't pay for the team that manages those appearances. You can't maintain security when the accounts that fund that security are locked. You can't run your operation when the financial spine that holds it all together has been severed. It is that simple. That is why what we are seeing isn't a measured response or a careful strategic plan being rolled out step by step. It is reactive. It is desperate. It is what happens when people who built their world on one foundation suddenly can't reach that foundation anymore. The freeze changed the entire game because when you can no longer touch the money, when the accounts are locked and you are cut off from the resources that run your world, you are not in control anymore. The situation is controlling you, and that is when people start looking for doors marked exit. Suddenly, out of nowhere, safety concerns are back to dominating the headlines. Harry's push for protection is being revived. Returning to the UK is being framed as absolutely necessary. The timing is impossible to ignore. This has nothing to do with actual danger. This isn't about paparazzi camping outside their house or drones flying over their property. This is about something much bigger. When the accounts get locked in America and the funding gets cut off and the financial scrutiny reaches its peak, that is exactly when all this protection talk ramps up again. That is when returning to the UK turns urgent. That is when we start hearing about how dangerous America is for them and how they need to be somewhere else. The pattern is too obvious. When things get hot financially, the safety narrative returns. It is a cycle we have seen before, but this time it is being deployed at a very specific moment. It is being deployed right when they can't touch their foundation accounts anymore. Think about what protection actually means in this context. In America, having security arrangements, having status, and having a title doesn't shield you when financial scrutiny gets serious. Your background doesn't matter when the IRS is looking at your books. Your royal connections don't change anything when accounts get frozen and filings don't get approved. The system here doesn't care about who you are related to or what family you came from. When the paperwork doesn't add up, everyone faces the same level of examination. But the conversation isn't really about safety. It is about jurisdiction. It is about being in a place where different rules might apply. It is about finding somewhere that feels less hostile legally. When the pressure is building and you are facing scrutiny you don't want to deal with in one country, another country starts looking a lot more appealing. This is why the security angle is being pushed so hard right now. If you can frame leaving as a safety issue, as a protection concern, or as something you have no choice about, then you aren't running away from financial heat. You are just protecting your family. You aren't avoiding anything. You are just going somewhere safer. The optics completely change. But let's be honest about what is really driving this. The timing gives it away. The foundation gets shut down, access disappears, scrutiny piles up, and that is when safety becomes the urgent talking point. Not 6 months ago, not 6 months from now, but right now, at this exact moment, when everything financially is falling apart, using protection as justification is the perfect shield because it is almost impossible to argue against. Who is going to challenge someone claiming their family is in danger? It is the perfect explanation for why you need to leave quickly, why you need to relocate, and why staying where you are isn't an option anymore. Why Britain suddenly looks good again comes down to something very simple: deep connections. We are talking about the royal family, lifelong relationships, and a place Harry literally grew up in. The UK isn't just another country for them. It is home turf. Harry spent his entire childhood there. He understands every protocol, every tradition, and every unwritten rule. The family connections still exist, even if they are strained. There is a built-in network of people who have known him his entire life. When things go wrong, when pressure builds, and when you need to regroup, there is something powerful about returning to a place with that kind of background. You aren't an outsider. You understand how things work because you grew up inside that system. Your roots run so deep, you can navigate it almost instinctively. This isn't about reconciliation or healing family wounds. This isn't Harry missing his grandmother's Sunday dinners or wanting to reconnect with his brother. What is driving this is practical. When the financial situation collapses in one place, when access to funds disappears, and when scrutiny reaches levels you can't manage, you look for somewhere offering different advantages. The UK offers the specific advantage of knowing the landscape better than anyone else. In America, they are outsiders. They don't understand the cultural nuances or the tax laws in the same way. They are operating in foreign territory. But in Britain, Harry understands the world in a way he will never grasp America. He grew up in it. He can navigate it without constantly second-guessing himself. When you are trying to rebuild, trying to regroup, and trying to figure out what comes next, that kind of insider knowledge is invaluable. So when you see them potentially heading back to Britain, understand that it is about going somewhere they actually comprehend. It is strategy, not sentiment. Right now, they need every advantage they can get. Being on home turf, having that deep familiarity with how everything works, and having relationships that go back decades is a massive advantage. Maybe the only real advantage they have left. When everything else is falling apart, when the financial structure has collapsed, and when scrutiny is coming from every direction, the smartest move is going back to the one place you truly understand. That isn't running home, that is strategic positioning. We are watching a structural collapse. The money is disappearing. This isn't a temporary setback or tightening the budget. We are talking about watching resources genuinely run out. Loans couldn't be secured. Brand deals that should have been guaranteed fell completely flat. Projects that were supposed to generate revenue went nowhere. According to sources, Harry himself had to start funding initiatives out of his own pocket just to keep things moving. Dipping into personal funds to keep an operation alive is not a rough patch, it is a disaster. It is watching deals fail to close, seeing partnerships evaporate, and watching the revenue stream just stop. It is not just financial, it is geographic. Canada didn't want them. That was supposed to be the fresh start, but it didn't work out. America started asking serious questions about foundations and tax filings. The UK is complicated at best and hostile at worst. Every door has either closed or come with conditions they couldn't meet. The public sentiment has turned cold. They are not just criticized or controversial, they are genuinely unpopular. People don't believe the narratives anymore. The sympathy that once existed has evaporated. Every system they touch gets exhausted. Every place they go, every institution they interact with ends up drained and frustrated. This is what happens when image races ahead of substance. Building a brand on compelling stories works for a while. Leveraging public sympathy and royal connections opens doors initially. But eventually, people want to see results. They want to see value. They want to see something real behind the image. Without that substance, everything collapses. You can't sustain an operation on storytelling alone. Staff can't be paid with narratives. Funding can't be secured with carefully worded statements. The math catches up. It always does. Numbers don't care about your story. They don't care about trauma. They just exist. And right now, the revenue isn't coming in. Expenses far exceed income. Loans get denied. Deals fall through. The math wins every single time. This is the moment where everything crashes together. Money problems, geographic rejection, public distrust, and institutional exhaustion. There is no safety net. There is no backup plan that suddenly makes things okay. Just the reality of a situation spiraling downward faster than anyone can manage. Image was the currency, and that currency has lost value. There's not much left to trade on now. Every move feels desperate rather than strategic. Every statement feels reactive rather than planned. The runway has ended. The resources have dried up. The doors have closed. The confidence that rules didn't really apply is meeting a reality where rules absolutely do apply, where math matters, where paperwork matters, and where the numbers have to add up. If what is being talked about here is real, then this isn't just another celebrity scandal. This isn't tabloid drama or royal family gossip. This is a countdown. We are watching it happen in real time. Because here is the thing about money. While it moves, everything looks fine. But once access gets cut off, once accounts get frozen, and filings don't get approved, the absence becomes deafening. That absence reveals more than any statement or interview ever could. Once the cash dries up and the scrutiny reaches a certain level, controlling the narrative becomes impossible. Statements can be issued, but none of that matters against documentation that tells a different story. Financial records aren't swayed by trauma or victimhood. Spreadsheets focus on one thing: do the numbers add up or don't they? Stories can be spun, but tax filings cannot. The documentation either checks out or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, no amount of PR can fix that. This is why everything we have covered matters. The frozen accounts, the missing filings, the Invictus questions, the sudden security concerns, and the potential move back to the UK are all connected. They are all pieces of the same puzzle. Stepping back to look at the whole picture, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The absence of answers becomes the story itself. Locked accounts and disappearing access create their own narrative, and that narrative is getting louder every day. This chapter isn't over because financial documentation demands resolution. It forces decisions. It creates pressure that builds until something has to give. Right now, we are watching those decisions play out. The cash has stopped flowing. The questions haven't been answered. The pressure keeps building. The numbers still need to add up. And until they do, this story is only just beginning.